Hello everyone, my name is Josh, this is Whimsical Interesting Musings, and today we will be talking about the 7th series of Inside Number 9. So without further preamble, let's get into the episodes. The first one is called Merrily Merrily, and it stars Pemberton, Shearsmith, and a face from their past, Mark Gatiss, who famously worked alongside them in the show League of Gentlemen as a co-writer and performer. And I have to just say, it's great to see these characters back together again and actually working off of each other in the way that they do best. And I absolutely just love the idea of this entire premise of these characters basically going out on a pedalo and getting lost under the cover of darkness and out in the middle of the lake. And this particular episode is really interesting because it isn't really a horror-themed episode. It feels more like a drama than anything else. The whole entire episode basically starts with these three friends reuniting from university, one of whom is a dropout and pretty much has never returned to university since. He's played by Pemberton, who has a girlfriend played by Diane Morgan, and she kind of starts off as your very stereotypical, kind of, not very bright, very kind of ditzy, very kind of almost too wrapped up in herself kind of girlfriend or partner that certain characters in TV shows like to have. Or there's either the really snobbish one or the one that kind of just doesn't care who she is. She just kind of just owns who she is, and she just kind of has this not very bright personality. She's very kind of almost dim, and that kind of almost unintelligence is kind of almost played for laughs, and that's kind of the big joke. And this particular character actually surprisingly has a little bit more depth to her than what was originally projected when we first encounter her, when she's first making her introductions to these three friends. And Pemberton is an interesting character because he basically is dyslexic. There's one instance in the episode where Shearsmith confuses a pedalo, which is a four-seater boat that you basically pedal with your feet, and he actually confuses it with calling it a pedo instead of a pedalo, and that's a funny joke already, but it also does a very good job of actually just giving us an insight into Shearsmith and Pemberton's character, as we later find out that he is dyslexic and he was planning on becoming a children's author, writing those baby's first word books. And it's met with a lot of snobbery at first from the other two friends of the group, Shearsmith and Mark Gatiss, who's gone on to fashion quite a career of his own as a television writer himself, working on shows like Sherlock, which is a great show starring Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman, and that's a great show. But then we also did a reimagining of Dracula, which was actually pretty good. He did 3 episodes of that. A lot of people tend to think that the first 2 episodes are really good, but then when it gets into the 3rd episode, it actually kind of loses a lot of the flair and the, grandiosity and the intrigue. But to me, I like all 3 episodes. They both have something very interesting to offer. I'll actually do a separate video on the Dracula series if people actually want it. So let me know in the comments if you actually do want me to review the 3-episode series of Dracula. I'd really like to, hear your thoughts on that. But yeah, Mark Gatiss' character is pretty much, a man who's had his career, take off in quite exciting ways. The head of his own company, he gets, a lot of attention, and he has a partner, and he's the father to dog daughters. And I actually really like that phrase, and of course that was something that Mark Gatiss insisted that they use, because a friend actually used it to describe a friend of his or him and his partner. So I thought that was actually an interesting little tidbit, a behind the scenes tidbit. But the episode is actually really melancholy, but it's also really kind of really kind of heartfelt and kind of lovely, especially with the storyline about Pemberton wanting to make these baby's first word books, because he has dyslexia, and he obviously just he had really a tremendous difficulty coming to terms with that, and actually coming to terms with knuckling down, actually reading, because reading is a huge part of learning in school. And when you're kind of struggling with the words and you're struggling to interpret what the words sound like and all these other things, it can be very difficult. And often, I don't know if people did it now, but back when my dad and people of my dad's generation was at school, they'd often get up in front of the class and actually read a passage from a book or something that they really love to read. They'll obviously read it. And sometimes when you're reading out loud, it can be pretty nerve-wracking to kind of just get up in front of an audience and read something. But to actually, just sit there and actually sound out the words and have these moments where you do actually stop or you stumble over words and you can't really quite make it out, you tend to just give up and tend to just make it all up sometimes. And that's probably what a person with dyslexia probably has to go through. And the difficulty of people actually laughing or kind of, making fun of you because you can't actually, cipher out the words, as it were. So it really is quite a heartfelt moment when Pemberton actually is able to have this moment where he says, you know what, no one was really there for me. So when I am writing these books, I feel like I can actually help children who might be struggling with words actually get through that process and actually find reading more fun instead of a major challenge. And there's even that lovely moment where Diane Morgan's character as Pemberton's girlfriend actually says, it's a really lovely book. I actually cried when I read it. And I know a lot of people might laugh at that and say, oh, you cried reading a baby's first word book. But when you actually get to hear that story about what Pemberton actually went through when he was at university and how he struggled with dyslexia and how he feels like he's helping out other children with dyslexia by writing this book, it really does feel like a very heartfelt moment, and it's really lovely and really beautiful. And Mark Gatiss is very successful, but he also isn't enjoying himself. He feels like after that journey, he kind of has just become he's kind of a bit complacent, or as Pink Floyd like to refer to it, as comfortably numb. He kind of has become a bit complacent, and he doesn't really, appreciate what he's got, even though he does have a lot to be grateful for and a lot to be very thankful for. He doesn't really seem all that happy. And then, of course, Shearsmith is teaching psychology, the thing that he graduated as, at this same university he went to. So that's kind of like a full circle thing. He never really left, in the sense that he's kind of stuck in the past. And another great film that did this was the film The World's End, which is the third film in the Cornetto trilogy, the Three Flavors of Cornetto trilogy, starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, written by Pegg and Edgar Wright. That particular film, Simon Pegg's character pretty much is a character who is stuck in the past because he's constantly, revolving around his friends. He's trying to get his friends together, like the big group back together so they can go on this pub crawl. And it's actually really affected his life in a lot of negative ways, to the point where he nearly attempts suicide because he's so trapped in that world, that time capsule of the past, that little bit of nostalgia. And that's actually a really good exploration of that in its own right, but it's also just a really good movie. It's just a really fun romp overall. So it's great that kind of film can exist where you can enjoy it from a certain level, where it actually does critique those aspects of nostalgia whilst also, providing a very fun romp as well. And it's kind of the same with this. It kind of does a very good job at critiquing these sorts of things where you do find yourself going back and kind of revisiting the past and kind of, trying to, find something to hold on to, even when your present life doesn't really seem to be going anywhere. That's such a very powerful moment. And of course, that's something that was tapped into in the season 4 episode, Bernie Clifton's Dressing Room, where he basically is going through this entire odyssey of this person's life, of this partnership with this other person, just so he can find something to say and find a way of dealing with the fact that he never really got the chance to say the things that he wanted to say. But that's more a case of him revisiting the past, whereas this is a person, Shearsmith's character is a person who's literally stuck in the past and trying to overcome his own insecurities following his wife's passing. And that's the whole entire reason why he got all his friends out there in the first place. He wanted to give her one last farewell, and he even made a shrine to a memory, and he wanted to sell fireworks. And I thought that was a really lovely moment. And there's a lot of really lovely moments in this episode. And then the twist happens, and it's not a twist that I didn't expect. It wasn't even a twist that really made me think, oh, it completely, utterly changed the way you looked at the episode from that point on. It was actually just a simple idea that was executed very well, and I really did enjoy it. It was a really wonderful episode, and that's Merrily Merrily, episode 1 of series 7. The next episode is called Mr. King, and it follows a teacher played by Shearsmith who is just enrolled into a new school in Wales, where he is pretty much the very kind of serious teacher, the one who really kind of, wants the children to work really hard. But he kind of is a bit awkward to begin with. He has a lot of issues in regards to communicating. And there's even a lot of very uncomfortable jokes. There's even one very uncomfortable scene where Shearsmith has a carrot that looks like a certain part of the male anatomy, and he basically makes this entire spectacle of himself, and he does it in front of these children who are very kind of, shocked and surprised by this, display that he kind of does. And it's really awkward, it's really uncomfortable, but it's really funny as well. And that's something that this episode does very well. They take these very kind of almost uncomfortable moments and really just kind of ratchet it up to 11 and really kind of add humour onto it. There's even a very funny scene where Pemberton, playing the headmaster of the school, basically confronts Shearsmith about a discussion that he had with a particular pupil, where he references Michael Jackson and doing something very inappropriate and it really just kind of made me laugh, because he makes the reference. He says, "Did you make any references whilst discussing with this pupil the hairy meat whistle?" And I kept thinking to myself, that's actually stuff like that really just kind of made me think, wow, I love this episode because of how, funny it can be. But it really does kind of make you feel uncomfortable, to the point where you're thinking to yourself, is this actually going to turn into something quite dark? Because there is a reference later on in the episode where the headmaster says you had a breakdown at one point and you had to go on medication, you had to be taken away for a while. And I thought, is it going to be that he's gone to the dark side? He's doing some very, dark and very, serious things with these children. Is that going to be the twist? But then, as the plot thickens, there's a few twists and turns here and there in which you don't quite expect what's going to happen. And I'm not going to say what the twist is, because I'm sure you'll be quite surprised. But it's a good episode. I found it hilarious. The main character was very kind of awkward and very kind of stilted. And I kind of felt like, well, if you're going to make a fool of yourself, why would you bother go back into teaching? With teaching, it's a very difficult thing to do anyway. But when you're teaching children, that's a whole entire other layer of responsibility. So yeah, that's a difficult profession to go into anyway. So why would you make a fool of yourself in that way? Like, there's so many things, but that's the art of Shearsmith and Pemberton's humour and their writing, is they kind of can go to these uncomfortable places, but they can add humour and they can add it in a way that makes you feel like, oh, it doesn't make it feel even more uncomfortable. In the case of League of Gentlemen, they do it to ratchet up the discomfort levels, the uncomfortable levels. Whereas with Inside Number 9, they've really done it a very good job of really kind of making it feel like it's a great ice cooler moment. And it's a fantastic episode. It's Mr. King. It's a great episode, and I'd recommend it. The next episode is called Nine Lives Cat, and it follows a detective named Cat, who is a single mum, and she is a down-and-out detective who relies too much on the bottle to the point where she actually uses it to pour on her cereal in the mornings. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting quirk, but she's a damn good detective, and she's going to make sure that she gets, her superiors' attention, who are mostly men, no doubt, and she's, strong, independent, she doesn't need anyone's help, she's going to solve this case, and she's going to make sure everyone knows it, even her male superiors. And that's pretty much the episode, without going into spoilers, and I don't really want to go into spoilers with this episode. It's one of my favourite episodes because of the twist, which happens halfway through, but I really like the fact that Shearsmith and Pemberton did such a great job of kind of playing into these detective cliches, and I was friggin' here for them. I absolutely love them. They're fantastic. But the humour was really on the wall, and it got to the point where I literally thought, this has to be intentional. Like, this has to be, and there has to be a little bit of winking at the camera kind of thing every once in a while with these kind of things. But the way they did it was just so well done, and it really just kind of made me think. I really do hope that there's more episodes like this, because it was actually very inventive, and as a writer myself, I really love deconstructing how an author thinks up these characters, and how authors actually go into that headspace where they create a character and they don't quite know what to do with them. And I've actually been there once or twice with my own writing, and I do feel like they got it on point in that respect, where you don't quite know what to do. And it really is a great story, and it really is well acted, it's well written, and it's a fantastic episode. It's called Nine Lives Cat, and it's a good one. Moving on to the next episode, it's called Kidnap, and this episode was kind of interesting because it had the split screen gimmick, where you could, because the majority of Inside Number 9 is mostly focused in a number 9, whether it's an address of someone's house, or whether it's a particular day, or whether it's a place. It has to be a place or somewhere that people go to get away from the world. Like, it has to be a hotel room number, or a garage, or a parking space, or a particular object like a pedalo. And I really did like the fact that they did use a split screen to kind of show what's going on outside the number 9 and show what everybody else is doing outside of that. And the episode is really funny. There's a lot of great jokes. So there's this moment where it basically follows a woman who is kidnapped by the name of Lara, and she's being kidnapped by two men who are planning on blackmailing a insurance advisor so that they could get a hell of a lot of cash, essentially. And this episode is mostly focused on comedy and misadventures, because a lot of the stuff that happens in this is really hilarious. Like the fact that Laura's trying to phone her husband and call for help, telling him to call the police, and he's like, "Oh, what is it, darling? Like, I'm really busy at work. Why are you calling now?" And all this stuff, like, and she's clearly showing she's distressed and she's in trouble. Like, please call the police and things like that. And she's really, agitated and really kind of, stressed and really kind of afraid for her life. But he's just like, "Oh, come on, darling. Like, oh, I'm very busy at work now, darling. You have to call later." Like, stuff like that. And I kept laughing my head off, because I thought, oh God, fancy being married to this guy. You wouldn't rely on him for very much, would you? Like, but it's hilarious. There's a lot of great twists and turns. It is more humour driven than most. It reminds me a lot of Wuthering Heist, where the whole entire point of it is meant to be a comedy, and it is meant to be more a comedy of errors, or something like Zanzibar, where it is supposed to be very kind of off kilter and very kind of, zany and very kind of stylized. Whereas this episode really is heavily stylized, but it really does it in a very kind of incredibly fun way. And that's Kidnap. It's probably one of the ones where I feel like it definitely isn't one that I would recommend watching first, because it doesn't really show a lot of what Inside Number 9 is capable of. But I do think it's a really good episode. It's a really fun episode if you just want to kick back and have some fun. And that's Kidnap. The next one is called A Random Act of Kindness. And this episode is really interesting because because Inside Number 9 is mostly known for horror, suspense, and thriller type things with a little bit of dark comedy here and there. Inside Number 9, and often it goes into horror as well, Inside Number 9 this time around has gone into the sci-fi realm, and this follows a mum and her son who are basically estranged. They're not estranged. They have a very difficult relationship, because she's working her hardest. She's trying to, balance doing a job, and she's also trying to, do the housework and the cooking, and she's also trying to look after her teenage son. But her teenager's very kind of, mopey and very kind of like, oh, why can't we have more, Cocoa Pops and stuff like that? Oh, why can't we, do more of this? I'm upstairs on my laptop. I'm on, Facebook and stuff like that. Leave me alone. My friends want to speak to me and things like that. Oh, I hate you. That real kind of, Harry Enfield, Kevin type, stereotype. I'm like, oh, I hate you kind of thing. That kind of character, almost, but not quite. But he is actually played very well, and he a certain chance encounter with a stranger ends up, creating an interesting series of events. And this stranger happens to be played by Steve Pemberton, who takes a shine to this teenage son, and they end up bonding over physics. And this entire episode kind of feels like, if I could describe it, it's like if Back to the Future had a baby or had a one-night stand with Treasure Island or something like that. It just kind of feels like that kind of relationship, because Pemberton's character and this teenager kind of have a very, Long John Silver and Jim Hawkins vibe to it, in the sense that Jim kind of sees Long John Silver as kind of like a father figure, the father figure that he never really fully had, and that kind of relationship as well. But then, of course, there's a little bit of Doc Brown and Marty McFly in the two of them. It kind of feels, in my initial recording of this particular video, I actually compared it to A Random Act of Kindness more to a Steven Spielberg type film, or a Robert Zemeckis type film, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, or Back to the Future, or more Back to the Future and Castaway, those really kind of grand epic kind of things, or more something like E.T., or those kind of very, very kind of mystical but very kind of charming and light-hearted family films. It kind of reminded me a bit of that, and it really kind of added this charm and this niceness to it that I really wasn't expecting. And Number 9 does do these sweet and very light-hearted episodes every once in a while, like Empty Orchestra, or Love's Great Adventure. Yes, there are some elements in that episode that really make you think, oh, this is actually really difficult to watch sometimes, and it's really emotionally harrowing, but it really manages to bring home the bacon with the performances and the writing, and it really does a great job here. It's a great episode. I'd highly recommend it. And that is all I have to say. I'm just going to check very quickly to see if there isn't any more episodes that I have missed, because I think we are done. And I'm going to do a review for Wise Owl, but it's mostly going to be its own video, because I feel like I have so much more to say with that particular episode, and I will be doing a review of that in due course. In fact, I'm actually recording this while I am, while my other video is being uploaded to YouTube, so expect the Wise Old Owl review to be uploaded first. It's going to feel weird, I know, but I will be reviewing that at some point, just checking to see if everything's... Yes, that's all that's all we'll be discussing for this particular video. And if you like this video, please be sure to like it. And if you have a favourite episode of this season, or any of the series of Inside Number 9, please let me know in the comments. And I hope you all have a very good day. Expect the Wise Old Owl standalone review episode to be uploaded first, but this one will come in due course. Have a great day. Bye.